talk about the breakdown of the United States empire. If you're new here, my name is CJ, and for the past 4 years on this app, I have been detailing the collapse of the United States. And in this video, I want to discuss what I recently published in my Substack article talking about the breakdown of the United States, but in particular, 3 categories that I see could be the catalyst, if not escalation, of the collapse, which is white ethno-states, birthright citizenship, and the 10th Amendment. So starting off with white ethno-states, it is very important for you to understand and recognize that the country was founded to be a white ethno-state. It's not up for debate or up for question either. When the Declaration of Independence was signed and drafted, it referred to indigenous people as merciless Indian savages. Now, human beings, fucking savages. Black people were deemed property that can be bought, owned, and sold. Not human beings, property. The only people who were able to be deemed human beings and receive citizenship were white people. And if you refuse or do not fully recognize that history, you will struggle with forming a risk assessment. You will struggle forming a full analysis of the terrain we are moving into. And when you understand that white supremacy is the root of this country, it will help you make better risk assessments and understand the terrain we're facing ahead. Thinking about throughout U.S. history, how there have been white Americans in different pockets of the United States trying to build white ethno-states. In my article, I primarily discuss Pacific Northwest, in particular Idaho. However, the Ozarks, which is the region between Missouri and northern Arkansas, they're also trying to build white ethno-states. West Virginia and Maine, there are different pockets of the United States where white Americans are trying to build a white utopia and expel people of color who live there and block people of color from moving there. In the Pacific Northwest, what I discussed in my article, Idaho, for example, is kind of having a resurgence of this, where there is a white flight taking place, where white conservatives from blue cities and states are flocking to Idaho to increase the white majority and honestly trying to make the state more conservative. And what I think we're going to see happen is that there's going to be a conflict. Now, conflict doesn't always mean immediately violence. It could be a legal conflict nonetheless, but still a conflict will arise from the people who live in Idaho with the newcomers who are trying to organize with the neo-Nazis who are trying to gain political power by being elected at the local level all the way up to the top in the state and eventually the federal level. Nonetheless, white supremacy being the underbelly is going to cause conflict that will lead to the inevitable collapse, breakdown of the empire. So with discussing white supremacy, we must also discuss birthright citizenship, which came about through the 14th Amendment, which says if you're born in the United States, you are a U.S. citizen. However, there are exceptions to this rule. For example, if you were born in an unincorporated territory, aka colony of the United States, you do not automatically receive birthright citizenship. For example, if you were born in American Samoa, you will have to go through the naturalization process to receive a citizenship. And in fact, other U.S. modern colonies like Puerto Rico, Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands, they did not receive their citizenship through the complete enforcement of the 14th Amendment. They received the citizenship through legislation by Congress. Why, may I ask? Because white supremacy. The sooner you understand and recognize the country was never founded to be a multiracial democracy, the sooner everything else will make much more sense to you. Why is Trump attacking the children of immigrants with his executive order? It's because they want to make sure non-white people are not having babies in the United States. With discussing birthright citizenship, we must also discuss the 14th Amendment in its entirety, as well as the 2 other Reconstruction Amendments. 13th Amendment, which abolished chattel slavery, and the 15th Amendment, which gave suffrage to black men, but ultimately non-white men after that. And the fact that many conservatives would argue that these amendments, in particular the 14th Amendment, is illegitimate based on the political conditions at which these amendments were ratified to the Constitution, and the fact that they took place during the Reconstruction era, aka post-Civil War, when federal troops were rightfully stationed in southern states to enforce federal law and to ensure that these treasonous Confederates, those Democrats, would not get back in positions of power. Unfortunately, they did later on with the Compromise of 1877, whole other discussion. Nonetheless, when these amendments were ratified, they were ratified by the fact that the Republican majority in Congress had the support of the newly elected free black people, former enslaved black people, and those treasonous white supremacist Confederates were angered by that. And 100+ years later, guess what? Their descendants, their legacy, because white supremacy, again, the same folks who were never intended to be citizens, let alone human beings, are what ratified these amendments. They see it as illegitimate. And this goes all the way up to the highest court. I know in the past few months there have been some headlines about a University of Florida law student receiving an award where he wrote and argued the 14th Amendment being illegitimate. However, it does not start and end at these low-level private citizens. It does go to the highest court in the land. Think about Amy Coney Barrett, who sits on the Supreme Court as a justice, in which she wrote on a law paper arguing how the judicial branch essentially does not have the same stipulations, same restrictions of overturning precedent and striking down the 14th Amendment if they view it as illegitimate the way Congress does. Okay? This woman, when it comes to the question of the 14th Amendment, is likely going to make an argument that it is illegitimate in order to rationalize her decision. And the third and last thing I discuss in this video and the article is the 10th Amendment, which is basically what type of rights, powers states have outside the Constitution that are not explicitly written. We're watching this play out as it relates to abortion access as a way for Democrats to resist a Trump administration. Nonetheless, what's happening right now in Texas, Democrats fleeing the state, also related to the 10th Amendment. And we are going to see blue states try to resist via enforcing their state powers, and red states trying to enact more suppression going alongside the federal government, but in particular as it relates to their state matters on certain topics and issues. These issues about states' rights is going to divide the country a little bit more, because what rights you may have in California will be different from what rights you may have in Oklahoma or Mississippi, and the kind of conflicts that would bring legal conflicts about what kind of, again, rights people have, freedoms people have. Nonetheless, the white supremacy being the underbelly of the United States, birthright citizenship, and 10th Amendment are going to be pivotal in the escalation and catalyst for the collapse of the empire.
Please understand that Roe v. Wade is just one peg.
Okay, go watch her video. I briefly mentioned this in my Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health video, but their end goal is to get rid of the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment is what gave Black people citizenship in the United States. But what they want to be able to do is pick and decide who is an actual citizen in the United States and who has any freedoms and rights in this country. Because in each case, Roe v. Wade, Casey, Griswold, Lawrence, Obergefell, Bostock, and Lovings, it's all dependent on the 14th Amendment. All of it. Because of the due process, privacy, yada, yada, yada. But it relies on the 14th Amendment. Back in I think 2017 or 2018, President Trump said that he wanted to get rid of the 14th Amendment, and people were just like, whoa, because he wanted to get rid of the birthright citizenship that comes with, if you're born in the United States, you're a U.S. citizen. But what they really want to do is pick and choose who's going to live in their white ethno-state. Yeah, we're on the precipice of the balkanization of the United States, and I can confidently say that because it doesn't matter who wins come November. That is a train we're on. If Harris wins, Republicans will coup. Won't be like January 6th, be a lot more local. And then if Trump wins, the Democratic states are going to be their own type of movement. Definitely, honestly, kind of 10th Amendment folks, because they're not going to see legitimacy in the federal government. Trump is in office, and they will act accordingly. And this all really boils down to white settler colonialism, which is the foundation of this country, and the fact that it's finally boiling to the top because it's never been reckoned with. The United States has never decolonized. The Revolutionary War was not a decolonial war whatsoever. I know some, let me not, like I said, Revolutionary War was not a decolonial war. Nonetheless, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the roots of this country boiling to the surface, and we're going to have to just reckon and face that. And so honestly, more Americans should really just get comfortable being sat where they are in their region, because things are going to get very unstable, and things won't really start to stabilize till 5 years, probably a decade, to play it safe, to be honest. Thinking about how long the Revolutionary War was, thinking about how long the Civil War was, we're talking about 4 to 7 years of just those two. The Mexican-American War was 2 years, I believe, but nonetheless, it still took a minute to get stabilized afterwards. 2028 U.S., 2024 U.S., completely unrecognizable. We can still see 2020 and 2024 U.S., but it's the same. 2028, no, not the same. It will no longer be the United States of America. It'll be California, its own country. Texas, probably Oklahoma, own country. Yeah.